Greetings, friends, and welcome to another Saturday episode of Countdown to His Coming. Today's theme is a penny for your thoughts. A penny for your thoughts. We'll look at some scripture in Revelation chapter 6 and talk about what's happening to currency around the world. You see, a lot of that's leading us toward a kind of currency that was imagined by the scriptures hundreds and thousands of years ago from Revelation 13, where it said that you can't buy or sell unless you've got a mark. Yes, foreshadowing the days of electronic and digital currency, all because it makes no sense to mint the old-fashioned coin. Now, where are we going with that? Let's start over here in the 6th chapter of Revelation. And by the way, hang on, because we've got a lot of other things going on in the world today we want to talk about. But in particular, in Revelation 6, beginning in verse 5, it says, "When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, 'Come,' and I looked, and there was a black horse. Its rider held a set of scales in his hands, and then I heard something like a voice among the four living creatures say, 'Will a quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, but do not harm the oil and the wine.'" Now, the word denarius doesn't mean a thing to us. Yes, that was the currency being used at the time, but we have a hard time putting that in perspective. Now, the footnote in the Christian Standard Bible notes that a denarius was about a day's wage. Now, if you read the King James Version, it'll say something different. It'll use a word that you'll recognize. It will say a quart of wheat for a penny and 3 quarts of barley for a penny. Do we know of pennies like that? Hardly, because to use that word penny in our context and take it out of the 1611 context means it's totally not understandable. In fact, the penny is now up for discussion. Why should we even have pennies? Because it costs so much for them to mint. Now, I mentioned this the other day when we were looking at the parable of the lost coin and Wake Up in the Word. And some were saying, it costs 2 cents to make 1 cent. It costs, well, actually, the figure that was put out by the U.S. Mint this past year, was literally 3.7 cents. It's what it costs to make a penny. And this kind of just leads us to the idea that, wow, inflation has made the penny so worthless. Why spend $80 million a year to mint pennies when we're losing money every time we make one of these things? Now, I thought I would show you something quite interesting today, because my wife is quite a crafter. Some of you know that that's one of the things Sue does. Look at this wonderful example of a craft, this wonderful little church house that she made. Have you noticed what's making the roof? That's right, she used pennies. Why would you do that? Why would you waste your money to make the roof of a craft? Well, did you know that compared to some other things you could put on the roof of this wonderful little craft, pennies may be the least expensive? I noticed that as we were just buying some things for her to use in crafts, and some of you know my wife, she's the button lady. She just has quite a collection of buttons, does a lot of crafting with buttons. Buttons are worth more than pennies these days. You used to could buy a bag full of buttons for a quarter, not any longer. And all the other little pieces you might use for crafts. She paid a couple of bucks at an antique store the other day for one little piece that she wanted to use at the top of a tree for a craft. Compare that to the cost of pennies. Hey, just stick a penny up there. It's far less expensive because the penny is worth so little. Well, what's Revelation pointing to is really something that's the disturbing trend of inflation that can be caused by wars, famines, and all kinds of other things that we see happening in the apocalypse. But it shows just how badly our coinage can be devalued so that it's worth very little. Now, what does that passage really mean? I think when we get right down to it, newer versions make it a little more understandable. The NIV, for example, uses in Revelation 6:6 these words, 2 pounds of wheat for a day's wages, 6 pounds of barley for a day's wages, but do not damage the oil and the wine. Well, still, what's this amount of barley or wheat? What does that mean? The New Living Translation really translates that to us into more modern terms, because most of us don't just buy raw wheat or barley to come home and make our own bread. So the NLT puts it this way: a loaf of wheat bread or 3 loaves of barley will cost a day's pay. Oh, now we're getting down to what this passage really means. Yeah, that denarius, or what the King James called a penny, was actually what you would earn for working a full day. A day's labor can perhaps buy you 1 loaf of the best bread or 3 loaves of the real cheap stuff. And that's what you'd work all day for. Wow. But that's what happens when your money becomes worthless. Now, what's our government been doing to make it worthless? Well, it's gone into the print and disperse mode, and this has been going on all of the 21st century practically, where we try to buy influence in other countries by just printing money, runaway inflation, prices continue to skyrocket here while we send influence to other places. And now that Doge is beginning to uncover so many of these discrepancies, some of the ridiculous things that your tax money's been paying for, it drives us completely crazy. Now, yeah, you might be upset that we were buying condoms for Gaza or a $20 million version of Sesame Street for Iraqi children, but those are not the worst of the situations. It seems like we have literally been funding the terror that is so despicable in the world. One of the last things the Biden administration did was pump millions more into the Middle East, into the heart of Israel, to pay off these Palestinian terrorists, criminals being set free from jail. Well, what about these poor folks that are coming out of captivity in Gaza that look like Holocaust survivors? My goodness, they've been abused. Of course, many are going to come out just as bodies that are being recovered. And instead of, calling out this terrible double standard over there, where they're saying, hey, we'll release one of these Israeli hostages for 100 of our Palestinian prisoners, who are, by the way, all convicted of some kind of crime, in many cases a terror incident, attempting to kill people. And these people that are being released, the Palestinians being released, are being now paid off with funds that flowed through USAID. 1 million shekels apiece. Can you imagine being rewarded for your crimes by becoming a millionaire in simple terms over there? 1 million shekels for you as you get out of prison. Good job. Hang in there, keep preaching your hate and keep causing terror, and maybe there'll be another round for you coming. It makes no sense at all. But what this is doing to you, if you're an American citizen, is it continues to make your money more and more worthless. If you're in the market for a house, for example, Sue and I found ourselves in this position as we're renting and started looking at the housing market. And my goodness, homes that were affordable 5 years ago have doubled or tripled in price. And with the rise in interest rates, it's just pushed an awful lot of people out of the market. It's a strange, strange world. And now the demand for rising wages has to match these rising prices. And it's really made a lot of people who thought they were going to be set in middle-class America, it's made them uncomfortable to notice that they're heading toward poverty. Well, this is what happens when governments misuse their power and create things they shouldn't. Now, when it comes to minting pennies, this is something that is strange when it comes to what our government has been doing and what it actually costs. Are we losing money by minting pennies? We most certainly are. 3.7 cents to make one of those. You think that's bad? Now, this is not true of all currency. The rest of the currencies we actually can produce for less than their face value, but the nickel is actually worse than the penny. In a recent article from The Hill, it says, according to the U.S. Mint, producing nickels has also remained above face value now for nearly 20 years. In fiscal year 2024, it cost nearly 14 cents to make one 5-cent piece, one nickel. So, friends, don't you think that it's time that we looked at the ridiculous waste, it's the only way you can put it, waste of our taxpayers' money, and demand some accountability? Yet the folks that seem to be screaming loudest for this have got their hand in the cookie jar. And it's no wonder that when their pet projects and their pet issues, the things that are lining their pockets, are coming into question, that they are going to have a fit. And when we see how our money has been misused and how it's being used to house terrorists even in our own country, it makes you wonder who's in charge of this ridiculous situation. But we shouldn't be surprised. It's Jesus Christ who said in the Olivet Discourse that because of the increase of lawlessness, then the love of many would just grow cold. And this is what we see as far as reactions. It's kind of scary when you see representatives have been elected, like Democratic Representative Robert Garcia from California, who, by the way, was originally from Peru, has been calling for physical violence against Elon Musk. Did an interview with CNN. It says in this particular article from Todd Starnes, Garcia, who is openly gay and displays a pride flag on his official social media accounts, was asked to walk back an offensive slur he uttered against Elon Musk during a congressional hearing on the Department of Government Efficiency. Instead, he doubled down and calls for some things that, listen, you wanted to talk about putting insurrectionists in jail? Well, you got people calling for insurrection right now. Garcia then called, as the article says, called for violence against Republicans. He said, what I think is really important and what the American public want is for us to bring actual weapons to this bar fight. This is an actual fight for democracy and the future of this country, he said. On top of that, we've had people, even a so-called preacher, he's not a real preacher, from Chattanooga, Tennessee, who, by the way, was lining his pockets with government grants going to his church for taking care of illegals. Yeah, he was in on the gravy train, actually calling for violence against our own president and against the party that is now a part of this big change in America. These kind of things aren't being done by accident. It's just a part of this end time scenario that you and I are a part of that we read about in Scripture, so we shouldn't be surprised to see it happening all around us. For those of you who are just rejoicing and clapping that there's a new administration in Washington, just take a look at the foaming anger that's going on all around the country from those who don't like what's happening. They are openly saying we need to do something about it and we need to be violent. I really pray for the safety of those lawmakers we have right now in Washington and all over the country that are having to deal with these issues, because the corruption has gone deep, so deep that it's been affecting people in places that you would not even have imagined. I want to call your attention to one article that Todd Starnes shared with us about a Christian in the Idaho National Guard who was demoted, taken away from his position, and something put out among those National Guard troops that equaled basically Christians can't serve here. You can't make this stuff up, folks. An Idaho National Guard is now facing a federal lawsuit after they removed an officer from his command because he's a Christian. Liberty Counsel, which is a law firm specializing in religious liberty cases, alleges that the Guard has a no Christians in command policy. Actually, they discovered that there was a policy all put in by some of the new woke leadership in this part of our armed services that was determined to root out any kind of dangerous extremism in the ranks. And that dangerous extremism meant sharing your Christian values. Major David Worley was actually accused of creating a hostile work environment for offering his opinion on drag queen events in public libraries and other gender-related issues. Here's what's interesting. Liberty Counsel says, look, this guy wasn't running for public office. He was simply stating his position on a controversial issue of the day. But because then there was a person that decided to file a complaint, all of a sudden things took off. He expressed concerns about things like pornographic material for minors in public libraries and the medical mutilation of gender-confused children. All these seem to be out of bounds subjects, off limits. You can't talk about this. But all these issues are free speech issues, as Liberty Counsel pointed out. The comments were made even long before Worley was promoted by the National Guard. Well, it turns out that a gay subordinate had performed a Google search to dig up dirt on the Christian officer, made formal complaints that them were taken by the woke command there and put into action. And they made it clear to the National Guardsmen of Idaho, that you can't even have an opinion on these type things. And if we find out you've got this kind of opinion, which is the typical conservative Christian belief, then you're no longer fit for command. Well, these are the kind of things that are still happening all around us. And just because there's a new administration in Washington doesn't mean they're automatically going to stop, even though the president has issued directives that they should. No, friends, we live in a day and age where strange things are happening. A penny isn't worth much anymore. And it seems like your opinions may not be worth much, according to some people. And so the fight must continue and will continue until Jesus comes. What are you supposed to do about it? Well, you're, first of all, not supposed to just bury your head in the sand and pretend like you don't know what's going on. The Bible says that before Jesus returns, over and over again, we'll be called into court for a testimony. And that's what seems to be happening even as we speak across this land of the free and home of the brave. So friends, hang in there, keep looking up, and keep recognizing that the last days are challenging times in which to live. Paul said they were perilous times, and so don't be surprised when your faith is called into question, and you'll have to stand up and speak up for Jesus, even when others might be throwing rocks at you. Well, thanks for spending some time with me today. We'll do this again Monday when we start back in the life of Christ. Wake up in the Word. Come join me. We're in a great series on the life of Christ, 10 minutes every day, walking through his life each and every day. In the meantime, if you don't have anywhere to worship this Sunday, I invite you to join me in our Nehemiah series at the Mud Creek Baptist Church in Hendersonville, North Carolina. Our worship service starts at 10:30. We'd love to see you there. And later this morning, we'll actually be at a men's breakfast at Mud Creek, listening to Jamie Murphy with Men by Design. We're going to have a great time in just a little bit, guys. Hope I'll see you there. In the meantime, you have a great day in the Lord. Look up and keep hanging out with God's people, because Jesus is coming. God bless you.